What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Fantasy Tomorrow. My name is Caleb, and today we're going to be talking about Week 2 and doing a little bit of a rundown where we go over some of the different injuries that we saw in Week 1. We're going to talk about my 5 favorite waiver claims for this week, and we're going to talk about some matchups and some of my favorite and least favorite players as well. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. First off, let's go over some long-term injuries that we saw in Week 1. And this is terrible news, of course, for all these players. It's kind of sad that we have to talk about them in this way for fantasy football purposes, but hopefully all of them will get back to action as soon as possible. Let's start with Gus Edwards, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, he actually didn't get hurt during Week 1 action, but he got hurt in practice preparing for Week 1. He actually ended up tearing his ACL and is out for the season. So terrible news for Edwards. And that means that Tyson Williams and Latavius Murray are likely going to be the best fits for that Baltimore backfield. Latavius Murray just signed with the team recently, but I would expect them to kind of split carries as the season progresses. We'll now move on to Raheem Mostert, running back for the San Francisco 49ers, and he hurt his knee. He's still kind of getting evaluated, so we don't really know how bad it is, but it's very likely he's going to miss at least a few weeks. Now, in his absence, Elijah Mitchell saw most of the action in relief of him, and Trey Sermon, who we were very high on coming into the season, was actually a healthy scratch and kind of a crazy turn of events. So Elijah Mitchell is one of my favorite waiver wire ads for this week. He should see a lot of action going forward, and this will probably end up being a little bit of a split backfield as well. Now, Michael Gallup, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, had to leave the game with an ankle injury, and he'll definitely be worth keeping an eye on, and it's been reported that he's going to miss some time. Now, Jeudy, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, has a high ankle sprain, which means he's going to miss probably at least a few weeks. Now, Tim Patrick is probably going to come in and relieve him and see more opportunities. He had a touchdown in the Broncos game in Week 1, so definitely keep an eye on that. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick, quarterback for the Washington football team, hurt his hip and got placed on IR, so he's going to miss a good chunk of time this season, which means that back quarterback Taylor Heinicke is going to come in and should be able to keep that offense moving forward this season. Now, let's go into some more minor injuries to kind of keep an eye on as we progress through this week. First, Odell Beckham Jr., wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns, he actually ended up sitting in Week 1. We kind of expected him to play, but because of his knee injury, he's still recovering from that injury he sustained last year. He was held out at the last minute during warm-ups, and he's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on this year, as he hasn't actually been hit at all leading up to this season, and he's still kind of preparing himself for football action. Now, Brandon Aiyuk, wide receiver for the 49ers, this is kind of a weird one. We didn't really know this going into Week 1, but he has a hamstring injury, and little, of course, was known about it, but it caused Aiyuk to see a limited workload in Week 1. Which really kind of threw a wrench in things for our lineups. But we'll definitely want to watch his practices to see if he's able to improve it all going into Week 2, so that we know whether or not he's worth starting this week. And then finally, Evan Engram, tight end for the New York Giants. He also sat out in Week 1. He's dealing with a calf injury, and he's definitely someone we're going to want to watch during practices this week to see what his status is and if he gets any better. Now, let's move into my top 5 waiver wire pickups. Now, for this week, all of them are running backs, because there's just so many who I think should be given priority on waivers. And while there are a few wide receivers who are mostly available and who impressed in Week 1, such as Sterling Shepard, Christian Kirk, Van Jefferson, and several more, it's very likely that none of those wide receivers are going to be able to produce consistently. So I'd rather use my waiver claims on a running back this week. So my first waiver claim that I really like is, of course, Elijah Mitchell. I mentioned him earlier. He's a running back for the 49ers, and he saw 19 carries in relief of the injured Mostert. While his value will depend a lot on the severity of Mostert's injury and how that kind of timeshare in the 49ers backfield will shake out, Mitchell is my favorite ad for the week. Now let's move on to my number 2 ad of the week, and that's Mark Ingram, running back for the Houston Texans. He saw 26 carries in their blowout win over the Jaguars, and while the Texans won't have that game script very much this year, Ingram looks like the Texans' favorite rusher and should see plenty of volume and goal line work this season. Now, my number 3 favorite waiver wire ad is Kenneth Gainwell, running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he saw a pretty even split with Miles Sanders in his first NFL game, and while his value is limited now, he's a great handcuff to add to your roster. Now, my number 4 favorite player to add is Latavius Murray, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, due to the plethora of running back injuries in Baltimore this season, Murray should be able to come in and produce as a recent free agent addition. it wouldn't be surprising if he ends up being the lead back for the Ravens. And then finally, my number 5 favorite pickup for this week is Tony Jones, running back for the New Orleans Saints. Now, Jones has taken over the Latavius Murray role that he left behind in New Orleans, making him one of the best backup running backs to own as a handcuff, and he's definitely someone that's worth adding onto your team, especially if you have Alvin Kamara. Now, let's move into my favorite and least favorite matchups for Week 2. My favorite matchup for Week 2 is the Packers going up against the Lions. Now, the Packers were a complete mess in Week 1. They looked terrible, and it was one of Aaron Rodgers' worst games ever as they played against the Saints. But the Packers should be able to easily rebound against a rebuilding Lions defense in primetime this upcoming week. Aaron Rodgers and the rest of the Packers should be motivated to come back and prove they are still one of the best offenses in the NFL, so I'm definitely starting all of my Packers this week. And then my least favorite matchup for this week is the Panthers going up against the Saints. The Saints showed this past week against the Packers that they can shut down great offenses. So trusting Sam Darnold to head up the offense against them is just not that intriguing. While McCaffrey should get his regardless of what the matchup is, I would be cautious about trusting DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. Now let's get into my favorite and least favorite players. My favorite player for Week 2 is Justin Herbert, quarterback for the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, he's going up against the Cowboys, which is really just a great matchup, should be a really good game, and the Chargers are likely going to have to throw the ball a bunch in a game that could end up being a shootout. Herbert was fantastic in Week 1 and should be easily able to support Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and even Jared Cook through the air in what should be a huge week for the entire Chargers offense. And my least favorite player for Week 2 is Saquon Barkley, running back for the New York Giants. Barkley really failed to impress in his first game back from his ACL and MCL tear that he suffered last year. And he could find himself struggling again against a Washington front seven that only allowed 90 total rushing yards to a Chargers team that has a much better offensive line than the Giants. Barkley is a player to definitely fade in your lineups this week. Alright guys, so here's a review of the rundown for this week. And if you would like, you can download your own copy of this below in the description. And it's going to really help you prepare for Week 2. Guys, please subscribe for more league-winning fantasy advice, and please drop us a comment and a like as well, and interact with us so we can answer your questions and give you more tailored fantasy advice for your teams. And also, go check us out on Twitter and on Facebook. We're answering questions over there all the time as well. And guys, check out our other channel too, Pretty Smart Sports. We're talking about all sorts of different sports stuff over on that channel. You'll probably really like it, so go check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time.